it all hinges on their offense, right? If you looked at the qualifiers, they struggled to score. I think this team is better on paper, has more options, but they still don't have, outside of Bridget Carleton and sometimes with Kia Nurse, like players that can just get their own shot.
Welcome to Canada's Court, and it's all Olympics all the time here on the podcast, at least for the next 2 weeks. The last episode, we took a broad look at the women's tournament with Zina Keita, and now we're going to take a deep dive into Team Canada, the players, the expectations, how they've done so far, and where we think they're going to end up. Alex Adams hosts the Behind the Play podcast. He also writes for many publications, including a recent post about Yvonne Ejim, which I recommend you reading. Alex, thanks for coming on the podcast. Great to have you.
Thanks so much for having me on. I've been watching, this podcast from afar, so it's kind of cool to be on it. And you've had some really cool guests, and I'm just happy to be one of the little fish in a big pond. So I appreciate you having me on.
No, it's an absolute pleasure here too. We're coming on the Olympics, recording this like just a few hours before the opening ceremony. Are you able to watch the Olympics as a fan, or do you find yourself kind of sinking into the unbiased journalist? I'm just here to watch as kind of work in a way.
I just have a drone. No,
No, not the drones.
No. I'm a huge. The way I see it is, and you're in the basketball media space. You look at Will Liu, look at Blake Murphy. Those guys are serious journalists, but they're also fans. A part of them are fans too, and that's kind of how I see my role. Is to be objective, but at the same time bring the fandom in, because I think that's what people want. People want you to care. People want you to be invested, but also not skirt being factual and objective, and not just, playing the party lines, or in this team, the country lines. So that's my role, especially for Raptors Republic, which is such a kind of really great venue to promote basketball and to promote up and coming journalists, and include myself. And so that's the way I see it. So I definitely have the one thing I will say is being at the FIBA World Cup last year, and I remember a French journalist. Canada beat the French by I think 30. It was like such a blowout, especially in the second half. And I'm doing a post game podcast in this little corner of the arena, and the French journalist comes up to kind of walks up the stairs, looks at me, he's like, "Next time, France is going to kick Canada's butt." And I'm like, "You just lost by 30. I don't know why you're saying that." So that's where I draw the line. I don't attack other journalists from other, but
that's good. That's good. I feel comfortable now knowing that I won't be attacked about any of my opinions. Who knows? Maybe my opinions will.
We're on the same side.
Yeah, exactly. I like kind of asking this question leading up to the Olympics, because always a lot of the people I talk to here are obviously big basketball fans, but the Olympics kind of gives you an opportunity to watch a lot of different sports, and I know you cover a ton of different sports on your podcast. Is there anything you're like excited to watch besides basketball?
I'm a huge homer at heart, so it's all whatever Canada's good at. So definitely been invested in the women's soccer, which has been interesting. That's for another day. I actually know a good family friend of mine. It like kind of grew up in the pools with like Penny Alexiak, and so she knows those people. And I love watching swimming too. So Andre DeGrasse is really cool. But I think those are probably swimming, athletics, but whatever Canada's good at. If it's boxing, if it's archery, I'm gonna be a homer and watch that way. So but definitely it's the coolest part is basketball has always been my kind of favorite sport at the Olympics, and now it's Canada's really in it. Obviously the women have been there for a while too, but just cool to feel like it's Canada's moment on the basketball side, which I've been yearning for years. So that's my favorite part.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was 7 years old the last time the Canadian men were in the Olympics, and at that point didn't care about basketball at all. So the only thing I cared about within basketball was Space Jam. So I'm glad that we get to watch both teams. It's exciting to see both teams. Pretty much I was looking at the schedule yesterday. Pretty much every day There's except for a day here or there, you're getting to watch some Olympic basketball on Canada's side, and even some of the other teams are going to be really. I mean, a lot of the other teams are going to be really exciting to watch. Not just Canada. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's dive in a little bit here to Team Canada. They've had some warm up games. Which were a little up and down. The most recent one against Spain, they lost by 20. Spain, obviously a pretty tough opponent. What did you take away from that game? I mean, it's hard to really draw too many conclusions since it is exhibition games, but we're getting pretty close here. It's game time almost.
Yeah, I think the thing that I noticed the most is if Canada can be a decent offensive team, the women's side, they can find ways to score. If Bridget Carleton plays well, Kia Nurse makes shots, they're going to be in it with very good teams like Spain. You saw it, they played Australia the day before, and they were able, their offense wasn't great, but it was good enough, and their defense took over, and they were able to beat a really good Australian team. So that's what my worry is, can they score enough? They don't really have a point guard that is at that level that they really need. They don't have a lot of shooting outside of a couple players here and there. They are really athletic, and I think that's the thing that looks a bit different than you were talking off air about the Olympic qualifiers, is like with Prosper in the fold, obviously Nurse, Aaliyah Edwards, they just look much more athletic. And I think that'll help them on the defensive end. But at the end of the day, it's going to be, can they score enough against these really good teams? And I'm a bit worried about it. But yeah, the one game against Australia, you're like, wow, we're back. And then you watch the Spain game and you're like, oh, this is exactly what I was worried about. So I don't know what to read into it. But I think overall, this team is probably the best team Canada's ever sent to an Olympics. The problem is, I think, kind of like on the men's side, women's basketball has elevated a bit. And we see that now we're a really good Canada team. I don't know if they're, I haven't looked at the bookies, but for me, they're the 6th, 7th best team to maybe get a medal, and that seems about fair, even though it's by far Canada's best team they've sent to an Olympics.
Yeah, that's not very fair. I think the other countries should have let us have a year Olympic season or two to be just a little bit ahead of them first.
80s.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But okay, it's going to be more fun, more good basketball. One of the things that really stood out to me about Team Canada was has been their big so far. I think that's a huge strength for Canada. I mean, even in the loss, you look at against Spain, like Kayla Alexander and Aaliyah Edwards both playing well. Where do you think, you mentioned the scoring is going to be a challenge? Who do you think needs to kind of step up there? Or do you think it's got to be kind of a bit of a group effort from all around for Canada to really kind of make it over that scoring hump?
I'm looking at Kia Nurse. She's been the face of the program for so long, and she's kind of, after getting a terrible knee injury, she's kind of slipped in her WNBA play. And I think she hasn't been the greatest for Canada too, even when they came fourth at the 2022 FIBA World Cup. So I think if she can somehow round into form, and the first 2 games back from the WNBA, she hasn't played that well, but at the same time, it's a big adjustment. I think if she can have a good to very good tournament, that really puts the ceiling on this group higher. I think Bridget Carleton, obviously, probably the best player on the team. She can go 8 of 14, then you're in a game, but she can also go 3 of 14. But I think for me, Kia Nurse is maybe the game breaker. Is if she can play well, this team will probably play well. And shout out to Kayla Alexander, because she was amazing at the Olympic qualifiers, kind of turning back the clock a little bit, and she was amazing in the first 2 games. And that's a really great sign, because there's some pretty good bigs in Canada's group, and the fact that they have Kayla Alexander at peak level defensively, offensively, just grabbing every offensive rebound, putting it back, really good touch. I think that's been a really nice thing to see in the last kind of since February, since the Olympic qualifiers, is Kayla Alexander really take another step up in her game.
And I mean, when you talk about offensive struggles, it can be a real difference maker if you've got someone who's collecting those offensive rebounds and getting you some quick, easy points in a time where you're otherwise struggling. That can really, be an igniter for the team, and I think that's something they're going to really need to make it far in this tournament. Like you said, there's a lot of tough competition. How are you feeling about their group here? I know for the men's side, we've called that group the group of death. I don't think it's quite as extreme with Canada. How are you feeling about that?
I would say it's not a group of death, but it's a really tough group. I think they should beat Nigeria, and the fact that if you get one win in a group without the USA, you're probably going to have the tie, like the point differential um,
Mm-hmm.
on the other two, or at least one group, and that would be enough to get you through. So I think I feel pretty confident just the way they played in the Olympic, like the pre-Olympic friendlies, that they'll make it out of the group. I think they beat Australia. I don't know how much to read into it, but it's a good sign. It's better to beat them in a pre-tournament game than
Yep.
not and get smashed like they did against Spain, right? If those
Yep.
results had changed, you'd be like, "Uh-oh." I think France is a good team, but Canada's had their number in the past. They beat them in 2022. They've done well against them at the Olympics as well in prior iterations. So I don't. It's France at home. I don't know. The French are in team sports can be very up and down. Never know what to expect. So I think I don't think they'll win the group, but playing for second is probably something that they should really feel like they can do. And at the end of the day, just make it out and hope you don't play the U.S. in the quarterfinals, and then you probably have a chance against anyone to make it to even the semis. So I think overall it's a tough group, but even all the other groups, there's no real. There's maybe one or two teams in the women's side that are maybe easy. Maybe not at the level of the rest of the group,
Mm-hmm.
and so overall, it's a tough group, but I think they should be able to beat Nigeria. France, I think, is a pretty winnable game, and then Australia might be a winnable game now, which I thought wasn't before. So I'm feeling optimistic, but I'm putting on my optimistic Canada hat for this group heading into the
we
Olympics.
we gotta have that. You got sometimes, it's no fun to just go into a tournament and think, oh, I don't know, we're gonna lose. That's no fun. You gotta at least have some of the hope. I know some people say, yeah, if you're expecting disappointment, you won't get disappointed or whatever. But that's no fun. That's no fun. I was just thinking as you were talking there, you got to watch your phone. If France wins, that guy, that journalist you mentioned, might give you a call. So
Yeah, I think he'll give me a call if it's in the quarterfinals of the men's side and Victor puts
Okay,
up like 35 and 10. But I'd love to get a call either way, and maybe
there
I'll
you
call
go.
him if Canada wins in the group stage. I'll definitely do that.
The other thing I was thinking about just as you were talking there, how much do you think Team Canada would, or would you want to kind of, let's say you're going into your third game and USA's probably won all three of their games, right? Would you consider not manipulating, but maybe depending on where you are in the standings, try and play it so you don't end up playing Team USA in that half of the bracket? Or are you the kind of person who thinks, just go out, play your hardest, win, and what happens? I feel like in a tournament like this where Team USA is such a gigantic force, you kind of maybe even want to. I just wonder about that. What do you think?
I think because if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not a expert in Olympic draws, but I believe that they're reseeding the tournament in the quarterfinals for the men's and women's side. And so I'm pretty sure a 3-0 USA with a 1,000,000 point differential will be the number one seed. So I
Yep.
think in this case, um, it will be the fact that Canada will probably need to win either way, not to be the last third place team. So but as an overall point, I think sometimes those shenanigans can be kind of good,
Hmm.
and it makes sense sometimes. But I think it's interesting with the reseeding into the quarterfinals. I don't think these teams can really play with it because they have no real indication of who they'll play, which is an interesting wrinkle. Because
Yeah.
before it'd be like you come one and then you play the two, and you're playing, let's say France if you're Canada in the men's side, or if you're on the women's side, if you come two, you'll play the US and get blown out probably. Um, and now there's a bit less of like, oh, who could you play? What would it mean, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I might actually I like that wrinkle. It doesn't help me because now I get stressed that they could play anyone at any time, which isn't really what I want for my stress levels. But I do think that's an interesting wrinkle that will be fascinating to watch. Is to do teams do that, or do they just say screw it? We're just going to try to get our best seed and see where the chips land.
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends where you are in the standings. Because if you're one of those, you know, you have the potential of sliding to the third place team. You really don't want to risk it. But if you're maybe more at the end and you've got one of the last games, then who knows what kind of shenanigans could happen. But I do think there's something to be said about just going out there and playing your best basketball. You mentioned the Olympic qualifiers earlier. It was interesting, really interesting last year when Canada needed, I believe it was Spain to beat
Hungary.
who's Hungary. That was it. Yeah, Spain needed to beat Hungary in order for Canada to win. And going into the game, I thought, well, it's toast, right? Because Spain, they don't care. They've already qualified. What does it matter? But they went out and they played their hardest, and they kind of earned Canada the spot in the Olympics. So who knows? There's something to be said about just always playing your best basketball as opposed to trying to game the system. The basketball gods might frown upon you. I don't know.
I don't know, but thank God for that 21-point comeback in the second half, or we wouldn't have this discussion right now. So shout out to Spain and them fighting for it. And I think there's something where if you translate it to the NBA, right? There's teams, or on WNBA as well. There's teams that have this culture of losing, right? And that I think when the Raptors were really good in like 2018, 2019, 2020 as well, they would win games just because they just had that mentality. I still remember that crazy comeback against the Dallas Mavericks with Kyle Lowry raining threes. And it was just because they knew how to win. And it didn't matter if it was a Tuesday in Charlotte or whatever. They were going to, play the right way. And I think there is something about that. It's a bit different in FIBA because you're not with the team all the time. But I think there's something to be said for playing the right way consistently. And those habits become fortified. And that's how you become a champion or do really well in the game of basketball.
And you know what they always say, you gotta beat the best to be the best. So at the end of the day, if your goal is to get a gold medal, it doesn't really matter when you play the USA. But in a tournament where there's silver and bronze, it makes it interesting. One of the things I think will be important for Canada going forward is they do have a lot of Olympic experience, even though they have yet to reach the podium. I mean, they've been at the Olympics time and time again. How much do you think that's going to play into, their success when you look at some of the maybe teams that don't quite have that same experience now? Spain and not Spain, France and Australia, lots of experience too. But I think that's a big factor. They have a lot of experience on that team.
Yeah, they do, but they also don't. It's interesting because they have this like generational divide, and I was talking about it before with some people. Just that, you have the Silas Swords, Cass Prosper, Yvonne Edgem, who is like that wave that will really be a key factor in 2028 in LA. And then you obviously have Nada Chanwa on her fourth Olympics, and Kayla Alexander and Bridget Carlton and Kia Nurse on multiple Olympics now. So I think it is definitely obviously a bonus. They know what it's like to be in it, and I think probably the nice thing is because of the way they squeaked in. I think last time in 2021 there was these expectations, and I think they maybe got a bit ahead of themselves, and obviously didn't make it out of their group, and they should have. And now it's a bit like, okay, let's just day by day, win game by game, make it out, not get too high, not get too low. And I think that will definitely benefit them. And I think this group has done very well on the international stage outside of that Olympic qualifier. Obviously the 2022 FIBA World Cup is no joke to come forth in that tournament. And they played really, really well. For stretches, they got maybe a bit fatigued at the end because they were running their starters maybe a bit too much. And so I think overall it's definitely a good thing. But I don't know. It depends what players are in what roles. Like if Silas Swords is all of a sudden your seventh player off the bench in your rotation, that's a lot for an 18-year-old or Cass Prosper, right? So we'll see. But I think the nucleus of this team definitely has the savviness and is ready to kind of take that leap.
You mentioned some of those young players and how many young players they have along with the experienced players. which is really exciting. We don't want to start talking about 2028 already. I mean, we're here in 2024. It's the Olympics time. But is there a player on that roster that you're excited for, and you're really thinking like this has got the potential to be like the one of the future stars of Team Canada as we look forward? Because there's also, along with the fact that we're playing for a medal here, they also it's really important experience for some of those young players who now have the chance to be the player who's been to 3 or 4 or 5 Olympics, right? Well, not 5, that's a lot, but
Yeah.
3 or 4 Olympics and that kind of thing. That's who are you excited about?
I think for me, it's the pair of Silas Swords and Cass Prosper. They've done really well. They won the bronze at the U19s last year. Both were really, really good in that tournament. And I think when you look at this team, as I said, there's this generational divide. And for me, 2028 is where they should be. Okay, we head in the tournament. If we don't get a medal, that's a disappointment. I don't think that's the case with this team. I think they can get a medal, but a lot of things need to go their way. Especially we talked about the draw. If they get a bit lucky, play a team that they, anyways. My point is I think Silas Swords, obviously 5-star recruit. I talked to her. I wrote a feature with her. Really smart 18-year-old, pretty mature, telling me how when she joined the team, everyone was talking about their taxes and she didn't know what to say or what to do. So I think by 2028 she'll know how to do her taxes, if not already. But for her, I think just the shooting, she's a really smart player. She knows how to defend. She's not going to be an elite defender, but she's just a really smart player, knows how to find people. Obviously an amazing shooter. And then Cass Prosper is just that like big athletic wing, is a decent passer. The shooting is kind of the make or break for her. But if you watched that Australia game, she was really good defensively, getting steals, getting in transition. And that's something that this team doesn't really has had, that like big, long wing defender who can also attack the rim a little bit. They've kind of always had guardish players or like bigs. And so it's nice to have that. So I think those are the two players when you think about 2028 and who are like the faces of this team in 4 years from now, a long, long time from now. But I think I would not be surprised if either of them are kind of in the positions that maybe Kia Nurse and Bridget Carleton are in now for this team.
Well, what's really interesting, I think I've mentioned it a few times on this podcast, is they're there because they can contribute. It's not like Coach LePena just pulled them on because he's not thinking about 2028 right now. I'm sure he's very much thinking, I need these players on this team because I'm going to need something from them during this tournament. So just the fact that they're already at that point for Team Canada is really huge and really exciting. How are we? If what kind of are your? We talked a little bit about expectations. You think they have a chance at medaling, but maybe not expecting that, or it's not the most likely. What do you think it's going to take for them to reach that point, other than not facing the USA in the first round? What do you think they need to do in order to make it to that point? Is it just, as you mentioned earlier, heating up on offense, or is there more to it there?
I guess for me, it's just navigating that group. They have to beat, I think, one of Australia or France to get in a position to make it to the, not just make the quarterfinals, but have a draw where they can legitimately beat one of those teams that they match up against. So I think for them, a good tournament would be you beat France or Australia, you get to the quarters. It's a 50-50 game, maybe it's 60-40, but you're in a game. If you win, that's great. Your semifinals, that's, even if you come fourth, that's an awesome tournament. If you lose, it's still a step in the right direction. And I think if it's anything like if they kind of struggle, lose, only beat Nigeria, play the US and lose, I think, sure, they made it to the quarterfinals, but that's not really what I think this team should expect as the sixth ranked team in the world. Or maybe it's fifth, but so that for me would be it. And I think it all hinges on their offense, right? If you looked at the qualifiers, they struggled to score. I think this team is better on paper, has more options, but they still don't have, outside of Bridget Carleton and sometimes with Kia Nurse, like players that can just get their own shot. They don't have a lot of elite passers to create for other players. They don't have a point guard. So there's a lot of holes in this roster, but there's also a lot defensively where they can be I think they were the second best defensive team in 2022, and that was how they won. They just grinded teams on defense, and then Bridget Carleton did Bridget Carleton things. So I think that's maybe their way to have a successful tournament. So can they score is really, for me, where does it come from? Is it a Silas Swords? Is it a Cass Prosper? Is it a Leah Edwards? Is it Kayla Alexander playing the way she has for the past year for this team? So a lot of different things, but overall, I think making the quarters and not just getting beat up by the USA would be a good result, and then everything else is gravy.
And like you mentioned, we're optimistic here, and I think a reason to be optimistic about that offense is, Bridget Carleton is coming off of some really good play in the WNBA, play in Europe. She's having a really, really great season, and a great season from three. So, like you said, if she can heat up and really get that offense flowing, I mean, then the challenge becomes who steps up next, because they're going to key in on her. But if she has that and makes some easier opportunities for players like Keita Nurse, like Kayla Alexander, that can be the real difference maker. But it's going to be exciting. I love the Olympics. I love basketball. I had another question here for you. So I talked to, as I mentioned earlier, Zanita Keita with The Athletic about just kind of the Olympics in general and the women's basketball in general. And then she asked me at the end if Canada has any sort of cheer that we do. Like USA, they go USA, which is always fun. Is there a Canadian cheer? I couldn't think of
I know
one.
being around the men's team, I haven't really been around the women's team, unfortunately. That's on my bucket list, but they do 1-2-3 Canada go, and then that's or 3-2-1 Canada, not 1-2-3. But you get my point. So that's the one thing I've seen, or Canada on three. And then,
so but like from the fans, like, is there a when you go to a big, whether it's a hockey game or something? I don't think there's any sort of.
I don't think so. I think that's the thing with this team that I hope that we hopefully see with both the men's and women's side after this Olympics, especially if both do pretty well, is that we have more of that culture to support the national teams, which I think is growing. But I think this Olympics will help it no matter what the result. But if it's even half decent result from either team, I think that's going to really inspire people to have that. I know the Latvians from my time in Jakarta for the World Cup, and like they are crazy and the fans are nuts, and it's like going to a soccer game. And I don't know if we'll get that here with with Canada, but at least where there's like, oh, I'm going to go watch Canada play, like that's awesome. And I think just it being on the minds of many people, I think will change. And I know from covering the men's and women's team, like how much 2000 changed, Steve Nash, and obviously the women have been making the Olympics, but they haven't really had that moment at the Olympics yet. And so hopefully for both programs, if they have those moments, then people become, huge fans and support, and maybe we have something better than 3-2-1 Canada chant. So yeah, that's my answer.
3-2-1 gold. Let's go for that one. That sounds
there.
Fun.
You go. There you go.
It's been awesome having you on the podcast, Alex. I really appreciate it. And just for everyone who's listening, where should they? I mentioned your podcast already. Where should they check out your stuff?
Yeah, so just my podcast, Behind the Play. I'm not going to be doing as much Canada stuff. I'm going to be at Raptors Republic, so that will be where all my Canada basketball stuff will be. I'll be podcasting after every men's and women's game. Hopefully, having some, other. Writing some other pieces as well. So that all my work will be at Raptors Republic during this 2-week work vacation. I don't know what to describe it for me, but yeah, check out my stuff. I'm on Twitter at AlexAdamsBTB, which is just the initials or for Behind the Play. And yeah, just check out my work. If you like hockey, I cover the Senators too. So and there's always better than the Leafs. Don't forget that. So I'm kind of kidding, but they do have more playoff series wins since 2017 than the Leafs. Just putting that out there. But overall, yeah, check out my stuff, and thanks for giving me the platform to kind of plug myself, and really appreciate coming on the show. It was a lot of fun.
Multi-talented, Alex. Thank you very much.
Thank you.